The 2024 fantasy season is absolutely in the upside down right now. So many busts, so many injuries, so much craziness. But before I get to the guys I think you might actually need to be panicking on, let me just start by saying if you got Kyron Williams, Jamar Chase, James Cook, Brian Thomas Jr., I know they didn't come through for you the way you wanted to this week, but they've mostly been very good to great this year. It happens. Down games happen. Give these guys a pass. Don't panic on them. But then we get to the guys that haven't been great all year. Starting with Tyreek Hill, a consensus top 3, top 2 pick, came into this week as the wide receiver 43 in PPR leagues. And look, okay, fine. Tua was out for most of the season. We knew he would suck during those games. But what about the last 2 games? 13 and 12 PPR points with Tua. I know this was a tough matchup against the Bills, but still, come on, 12 fantasy points. Now, he does get a great matchup this Monday night against the Rams, who just gave up a monster game to Jackson Smith-Njigba. So let's hope he can rebound in that one. But if it doesn't happen for him on Monday Night Football against the Rams, we are in full-fledged panic mode, and Tyreek Hill is going to start trending to being one of the biggest busts of the 2024 season. And CeeDee Lamb came into this week as the wide receiver 4, but it sure doesn't feel like he's been the wide receiver 4. I mean, really, he's a wide receiver 4 because he scored 40 fantasy points last week. He's only topped 20 fantasy points twice all year. You didn't spend, again, a top 3, top 4 pick for a guy to only get you 2 games of over 20 fantasy points. And sure, he didn't kill you this week. He got you like 16, but again, you didn't draft CeeDee Lamb for 16 fantasy points. But now the real reason you got to panic is twofold. Number one, he's dealing with an AC sprain in his shoulder. We don't know how serious it is or if he's going to miss time. Number two, Dak Prescott left this game with a hamstring injury. You didn't draft CeeDee Lamb for 16 fantasy points, but you certainly did not draft him because he's playing with Cooper Rush at quarterback. Obviously, way too early to know the extent of either of these injuries, but even still, CeeDee Lamb has not delivered that top 5 pick you drafted this year. Let's hope Dak is okay. Let's hope CeeDee is okay. Let's hope they get this thing turned around. But man, the Dallas Cowboys, the whole team, this offense, this looks like a sinking ship. And you also didn't spend a top 5, top 6 pick on Breece Hall so he could be the RB7 coming into this week and then give you a solid, I guess, 10 fantasy points. This guy only has 4 touchdowns on the entire season. Give this guy the ball near the goal line. Let's get this guy some touchdowns. Now, I will say, at least in his case, there is something to maybe have some hope about. He has one of, if not the easiest, rest of season schedule for running backs. Not a single matchup going forward that should scare you off of Breece Hall. He also once again dominated the touches here. Braylon Allen barely touched the ball in week 9. We just got to hope the touchdowns start coming. That is what is going to take Breece Hall from being just a good fantasy running back to the elite fantasy running back that we drafted early in the first round. But you didn't escape the first round pain if you drafted A.J. Brown either. Sure, when he's been healthy, he's been a stud, but we had to go 4 weeks without A.J. Brown after week 1 with that hamstring injury. Then we finally get A.J. Brown back and he was great. And then bam, a knee injury this week. Left the game, never came back. Now we don't know the severity here. Are we going to have to go more weeks without A.J. Brown? I get it. When he's healthy, he's been great, but there's still frustration when your first round pick is missing games multiple times a year over and over. It's not helping your fantasy team. Let's hope the injury isn't serious. Let's hope he can get back out there soon, if not in week 10. But man, this is getting very frustrating for A.J. Brown this year. But there can't be anything more frustrating than your first round pick being a bust because he got ejected for throwing a punch. First of all, the guy's wearing a helmet. Why do NFL players throw punches? But second of all, it's like, okay, injuries suck. Your busts suck. But an ejection in the first half for Puka Nacua, that was just brutal here. This is after you had no Puka Nacua for almost the entire year. You had him for a half in week 1. You got him back last week and he was good. Not elite, but he was good. And then he gets ejected in the second half. This guy has also been one of the worst first round picks. Now, I will say, in fairness to Puka Nacua, who I liked and I thought deserved to be a first round pick, it's not an injury. I don't think he's going to get suspended here. I guess we'll see. But when he's back, he's healthy. He should be a stud. So at least there's hope for the rest of the season. But man, having Puka Nacua in fantasy this year has been a nightmare so far. And it maybe hasn't been a nightmare having Marvin Harrison Jr. this year in fantasy, but if you spend a first round pick or an early second round pick on him, it certainly hasn't been fun. He's only had a couple really big games. Came off that big game last week and thought, okay, he can keep this momentum rolling. No, he couldn't keep the momentum rolling. Fumbled in this game. Had some balls stripped away from him that maybe could have been catches. And of course, his quarterback, Kyler Murray, has been very volatile this year. Came into this week as the wide receiver 18. He's only given you 2 20-point games all year. Again, not what you were looking for when you drafted this guy late round 1, early round 2. He hasn't been like a complete bust because at least he's been serviceable in fantasy. But again, we're not looking for serviceable with our first, second round picks. but he is a rookie. There's still time for him to get going in the second half. A lot of times rookies get better down the stretch. So I'm not giving up hope on Marvin Harrison, but I understand if you're extremely frustrated with him right now. And now Drake London has mostly been good this entire season for fantasy, but of course, we can't have nice things in fantasy, at least not for wide receivers, because every good wide receiver has to get hurt this year. Drake London goes out there first quarter, catches a touchdown, looks like, all right, on his way to a big game. Nope, hit pointer on the touchdown. We don't see him the rest of the game. And now we got to wonder, is he going to miss time here? Are we going to be without Drake London? I mean, this is just how it's been for wide receiver this year. Either bust, injuries. Meanwhile, running backs just chugging along. 30-year-old Derrick Henry might get a 2,000-yard season. Joe Mixon looking the best he's ever looked. Alvin Kamara, like, he's in his prime. What is going on? Oh, I know what's going on. We're in the upside down. No doubt about it. All right, now I do need to take a bit of a serious tone with Chris Olave. Obviously, a very scary scene. He was on the field, unconscious, got stretchered off. It sounds like he's okay. I know it was frustrating for fantasy. I know he didn't help your fantasy team. But you got to remember, this guy's a human being. His brain has taken massive hits before. I know it sucks for your fantasy team, but he's a human being. Let's try to put our emotions aside and be like, hey, okay, let's worry about Chris Olave a little bit. That being said, for fantasy, we do have to be a little nervous here because this is his 5th concussion now. You got to wonder, are they going to do what they did with Tua, like put him on IR, give him some time to come back, and then when he comes back, is he always at risk of another concussion? It was really looking like Chris Olave was set up to be an absolute league winner this year, rest of the season, but now we may never know. But most importantly, let's just hope Chris Olave is okay and there's no long-term effects. But we don't have to feel that way about Malik Nabers. I mean, you're sure he did miss a couple games with that concussion, but his curse here is really his quarterback, Daniel Jones. And this is what we were worried about all offseason. Now, we had that nice stretch of games where it looked like, hey, it doesn't matter, Daniel Jones, you just start Malik Nabers no matter what. But now he's got 3 straight games where, no, he hasn't been killing you. He's been fine for fantasy, but that's the thing. He's just been fine. The upside just isn't there for Malik Nabers right now. Yes, the targets are there. Yes, the catches are there. But where are the yards? They're gone because everything has to be short little dinky passes to Malik Nabers because he's stuck with Daniel Jones. And they won, so it's not going to be Drew Lock next week. And I got bad news for you. Drew Lock is not an upgrade for Malik Nabers. Look, Malik Nabers probably not going to be a bust this year. If you got him in round 5, round 6, he's going to be fine for your fantasy team. And he'll probably have some games here and there where he has big upside games. But I think for the most part, he's just going to be a solid wide receiver 2 rest of the season. And really, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, we didn't draft Jalen Waddle this year to be an absolute stud first, second round pick, but we drafted him to be a lot better than this. And kind of like Tyreek Hill, we said, okay, let's give him a pass. No Tua for all those weeks, but man, these last 2 games with Tua have been terrible. He saved his day today with a touchdown, and by saved, I mean he wasn't like an absolute 0 for your fantasy team. But he really didn't help your fantasy team, and he hasn't helped your fantasy team so far this entire season outside of week 1. I think the real issue here is we're seeing Devon Achane become a weapon in the passing game, and even Jonnu Smith, the tight end, getting a little bit involved. But again, he's got this good Rams matchup on Monday Night Football like to talk about with Tyreek. He's got one more chance for me to at least show something, some signs of life. If not, I'm going to label this guy a bust. And I'm flat out ready to just label DJ Moore a bust. And look, it's not his fault. He's got the Caleb Williams roller coaster. You never know what you're going to get from this offense, from this passing offense. DJ Moore is a good player. DJ Moore deserves better than this. But this offense with Shane Waldron, Caleb Williams is just such a roller coaster. So frustrating for fantasy. There were so many questions we got this week about DJ Moore. I wanted to say no every single time. I'm pretty sure I said no like 90% of the time. But I do regret it wasn't 100% of the time. I'm pretty much done with DJ Moore at this point. Yes, he's on the field a lot. He's a good player. He'll have a game or 2 here where he goes off. But good luck guessing when those are. And then a running back who looked like maybe he was going to be a league winner this year, was going to be one of the steals of the draft, David Montgomery, has definitely kind of slowed down as of late. This is 3 straight games where he hasn't reached 15 PPR points. 2 of the last 3, he's had 12 or fewer PPR points. This is always the worry with David Montgomery in this offense. Yes, David Montgomery is a solid real-life running back. He's a solid fantasy running back. But when he's not scoring touchdowns, he's not going to give you a whole lot. Look, earlier in the season, I was feeling like David Montgomery, a strong start every week. Now I'm just feeling like he's more where he should be, a solid RB2 with some touchdown upside. And do we have to get a little worried about Kenneth Walker as far as potentially being a league winner here, right? It was the RB9 coming into this week, RB5 in terms of points per game, but now 2 kind of down games for Kenneth Walker, no touchdowns each of the last 2 games. But look, there's no reason to worry here. He just got 24 carries in this game. he's still involved in the passing game. Kenneth Walker will be okay. Don't worry about Kenneth Walker going forward. The touchdowns will start to come, and when they do, he will be a monster again. And then, of course, I got to mention Jordan Love and Kyler Murray. They were awful today. I totally get it. Jordan Love, though, he's been mostly great this year. He was coming off that groin injury. Maybe he shouldn't have started. You got to just give him a pass today. Plus, the weather was pretty terrible. Gotta admit, weather was pretty bad there. And Kyler Murray just is what he is. He's a volatile QB. He can always go off, but he always can have games like this, too. You gotta just give these guys a pass this week. And then it wasn't National Tight End Day today, so that means guys like David Njoku, Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid were all terrible for fantasy because they are tight ends, and this is what tight ends do. One day, my dream of no tight ends in fantasy will be realized, and people will finally say, we don't need this pain. But until then, it's too bad. We got to just deal with the pain that is the tight end position.